The first warning is not a siren, it is a flash. A dead satellite drifts across the night side of Earth, quiet, unlit, already forgotten by almost everyone who once depended on it. Then, a fragment the size of a coin crosses its path at orbital speed. There is no fireball in the usual sense, no rolling explosion. In vacuum, violence looks clean. A white pulse, a burst of metal, a spray of panels and insulation and frozen shards moving faster than a rifle round. Telemetry spikes. One object becomes 2 signals, then 5, then too many for the first screen to hold. And before anyone on the ground has a headline for it, the debris is already coming around again. Space trash sounds harmless until you remember where it lives. In low Earth orbit, objects can travel around 7 to 8 kilometers every second. A paint chip is not just a paint chip at that speed. A bolt is not just a bolt. Even small debris can carry enough energy to puncture hardware, shatter surfaces, and create more debris. That is the feedback loop engineers worry about. One collision makes fragments. Those fragments cross other paths. Another impact makes still more fragments. Not an instant Hollywood apocalypse. Not a wall of rocks around Earth. A slower, uglier problem. More close calls. More avoidance burns. More dangerous lanes. More missions spending fuel just to stay out of trouble. This story is fictional. The concern is not. The vehicle closest to the new debris field has no flag on the hull and no heroic name on the public feed. Its call sign is Broom 7. Inside are the orbit janitors, Mara Voss, mission lead, Jay Kim, robotics, Priya Nair, orbital dynamics, and Ortiz, the pilot everyone trusts because he never wastes a burn. Their job is not glamorous. They do not plant flags. They do not rescue astronauts from movie posters. They match speed with dead machines, read the spin of broken hardware, and try to remove hazards without creating new ones. The rule is simple enough to fit on a patch: touch nothing unless you can control what happens next. Tonight, that rule is already under pressure. The first catalog update shows the dead satellite splitting into a cloud. Most pieces will be tracked later if the sensors can separate them, but one heavy chunk is different. A tumbling satellite bus, dense enough to matter, rotating just enough to make capture dangerous. If it crosses the wrong lane, the next collision may not be small. Priya lays the orbit on the forward glass, blue for safe crossings, amber for uncertainty, red for paths that should not exist this close together. The target does not look dramatic. That is the frightening part. It is a box with torn solar panels wrapped in glints of foil, rolling once every 9 seconds. The kind of thing you could mistake for harmless if you saw it sitting in a museum. Jay arms the capture clamp. The clamp is not a claw from science fiction. It is a patient machine, padded contact points, 4 sensors, a tether socket, software that would rather miss than grab badly. Capture is not about strength, it is about timing. Broom 7 slides into the approach corridor. Ortiz gives them a shallow closing rate. Mara watches the fuel margin. Priya watches the red paths. Jay watches the tumble. 3 meters. 2. The clamp opens. A shard of insulation spins through the LiDAR beam and the target solution jumps. The software hesitates for less than a second. In orbit, less than a second is enough. The clamp closes on empty space. The tumbling bus rolls past, close enough for its torn panel to scrape a warning across the camera. No one shouts. Professionals rarely do when the math gets worse. Mara says, "Reset the model." Priya already has. The map changes color before the crew speaks. At first, it is only a few red threads. Then the prediction window extends and the threads multiply into a web. This is where a debris cascade becomes hard to explain and easy to misunderstand. It is not that the sky becomes unusable overnight. It is that every new fragment adds another future calculation. Every active satellite, every crewed station, every telescope, every weather instrument and communications relay has to share the same enormous but increasingly busy volume of space. Some debris falls back quickly. Some can remain for years. At higher altitudes, debris can remain much longer. The danger is uneven, concentrated in lanes, altitudes, inclinations, and timings. Priya marks the worst crossing. The heavy bus will pass near a cluster of fragments from the first breakup. If it clips them, the impact could spray material into a lane that another operational satellite is scheduled to cross after dawn. No single number on the screen says catastrophe. That is not how orbital safety works. Instead, the screen says probability. Then it says probability again. Then the probability starts stacking. J offers a second capture pass. Ortiz says they can make the angle, but not for free. The burn will move them into a thinner margin for return. Mara asks the only question that matters: if we miss again? Priya does not look away from the red web. Then we stop chasing. We start dodging. The cleanup plan changes from elegant to ugly. The clamp cannot safely catch the bus while it is tumbling at this angle. The drone can get there, but the vehicle cannot stay close without crossing one of Priya's red lanes. So Jay proposes a tether run. The tether is thin, bright, and expensive. It is designed to connect a small capture drone to a larger vehicle for controlled drag and deorbit operations. In training, it is used slowly. In simulations, it is used carefully. Nobody likes using it as a last-second lasso around damaged hardware. But the geometry is clear. The drone will pass high, Broom 7 will pass low. The tether will stretch between them as the target tumbles through the gap. If the clamp bites, the bus will be pulled just enough to change the next crossing. Not destroyed, not magically erased, nudged out of the worst future. It is a tiny change measured against a planet. Tonight, tiny is enough. Mara asks for remaining fuel. Ortiz gives her the number and then gives her the truth. We can do the catch, or we can keep the easy ride home. We do not get both. No one says sacrifice. It would sound too large for the thing they are about to lose. It is only a drone, only reserve fuel, only the comfortable version of the mission. But in space, comfort is not decoration, it is margin. The countdown starts at 90 seconds. At 90 seconds, the cockpit goes quiet. At 70, Priya stops calling the full map and gives only what the crew needs: target spin, closing rate, corridor drift. At 50, the drone detaches. It looks impossibly small against Earth. A little machine, a little clamp, a little line, sent into a field where every mistake becomes permanent for someone else. At 40, Ortiz rolls Broom 7 below the target plane. The stars turn. Earth moves across the window. The red warning line on Mars' display touches the reserve limit and keeps going. At 30, the drone fires its final burst. Jay does not blink. The clamp reaches. The tumbling satellite bus rolls away from it, then toward it, then away again. The timing is wrong by half a rotation. Mara orders no abort. At 18 seconds, Jay changes the clamp from a catch to a brush, not a full grab. Just contact, friction, a chance to slow one edge. The first pad hits and skips. The second pad catches. The tether snaps tight. For one perfect moment, the whole map becomes a single line: drone, tether, dead satellite, cleanup vehicle, Earth below. Then the drone begins to tear itself apart. Torque spikes. The clamp joint overheats. The little machine is saving the orbit by becoming junk of its own if they wait too long. Mara gives the order. Jay cuts the drone loose but keeps the tether tension long enough for Ortiz to spend the last controlled burn. The heavy bus moves by a fraction of a degree. On a screen, it is almost nothing. On Priya's map, the red crossing disappears. Success does not look like a celebration. It looks like quiet telemetry. The debris field is still there. The crew did not clean all of orbit. They did not solve decades of launches, breakups, abandoned hardware, and fragments too small to track easily. They changed one future crossing before it could become a worse one. That is why orbital debris work is so difficult to dramatize honestly. The best outcome is often prevention. A collision that does not happen. A satellite that never has to dodge. A crew that never receives the emergency call. Real-world debris mitigation and active debris removal are not magic vacuum cleaners. They involve tracking, policy, design choices, passivation, avoidance maneuvers, responsible end-of-life plans, and, in some concepts, rendezvous and capture of large, uncooperative objects. The fictional orbit janitors are a story about that invisible labor. Because orbit is not empty, it is infrastructure. Weather forecasts, communications, navigation, climate science, disaster monitoring, research, defense, and exploration all depend on paths above us staying usable. And the people who protect those paths may never get a clean victory shot. Sometimes the triumph is that the map gets boring again. Hours later, Priya replays the model. The first impact should have been random, a dead satellite, a loose fragment, bad timing. But one track does not fit. A small object passed through the debris field minutes before the collision. No transponder, no catalog match, no name in the system. Mara tells her to run it again. Priya does. Same result. Above Earth, another beacon blinks. And this one is moving on purpose. Orbit Janitors is fictional, but the engineering problem is real. Space debris is not magic doom, and cleanup is not magic either. It is tracking, patience, fuel margins, and people making the map boring again. If you want the next case, keep watching. One beacon is already moving.